So 20 years ago, I was a wildlife technician and working for the Forest Service, which most employees, when they work for the Forest Service, they also participate in fighting fire when there's fire season. And so I did that, and mostly on the side when there were fires, which our fire season in this area is usually from mid-July to mid-September. And I thought too, because it's fire season and we had the local fires in Spokane, I thought to share a little bit about that because it was 20 years ago that I was doing this. And it was also 20 years ago that I saw a flyer in Sandpoint that a teacher named Thupten Chodron, a Buddhist nun, was teaching in Newport, which is close to where I was working at the time. So it's a funny flashback in time and realizing how I've aged. But 20 years. But so firefighting, there's a week-long program that you go through called Guard School, where there's part-time classroom of learning kind of fire science and fire behavior and the organizational structure and everything, and then part-time going outside and digging line and playing with fire hoses and learning pumps and all the mechanics, and it kind of culminates by them actually lighting a fire out in the woods and you having to go find it and put it out and kind of go through an assessment of what would you need as far as other support resources or different things. So they do kind of a mock fire. I think they're still doing that, although it might be a little sketchy nowadays. And the other day I was telling Venerable about kind of the organizational structure, because it's an interagency system where it's state and federal agencies that when there's big complex fires like the one in Spokane, all the agencies come together and people are highly trained in kind of different departments as far as fighting fire, organizational stuff, the logistics, because you're having thousands of people come together. It's quite a organized structure. And they have a very good system that actually kind of gets taught around the world for dealing with different emergency things. And oftentimes when firefighters are not fighting fires, they will go out and help in other emergencies. I know when I was engaged in fighting fire, they did go out and help at Hurricane Katrina and different natural disasters that happen because it's such an organized kind of system of kind of a hierarchy, and then usually there's more on the ground level, there's 20-person crews, and then there's a crew boss managing those people, and then it's broken up into crews of 10 people, and there's a squad boss managing those people. So it never gets too big, so someone's always keeping an eye on their people, just 10 people to try to keep things safe. And a big part of it is communication, which is huge. And they use radios. I'm sure they use their cell phones a lot more nowadays. But there's different channels so that the different groups can talk to each other and you can filter out what information is pertinent to you and what you need to hear for everybody. And every day at a big fire, they do a fire briefing of kind of saying what the fire behavior is doing, what's kind of its forecast, how the weather is, what resources are available. And that gets updated. They actually do a weather update every hour just to kind of say what conditions are changing, because usually it's in the late afternoon that the weather picks up, that things get hotter, and that's when fires start getting much more erratic. Some of the basics of firefighting, it's still kind of in a way rudimentary, but it's still quite effective. A lot of the times is the basic firefighting technique is you dig line, they call it, bare dirt, removing any kind of vegetation, even tree roots and stuff, to bare soil that's 2 feet wide. And so that's a lot what you're doing, is just digging dirt around the perimeter of the fire, and people are up ahead of you kind of removing any brush with chainsaws and removing the brush. And then there's the crew behind just digging line, sometimes, thousands or feet around the edge of the fire. And then once you get a line dig around the fire, then you start bringing in hoses and pumps and the engines and things to get water to start spraying the water down and around the edges, and you kind of just work your way inward towards the periphery of the fire. That's if it all goes well, but then if the wind changes and things can be quite unpredictable. Usually, so when I was working regionally, I was either working on the weekends, or firefighters go out on 2-week assignments. So you're working 16-hour days for 2 weeks straight. It is quite intense, but and then when it's a big assignment, you sleep in these fire camps, which are usually county fairgrounds or school yards. It's nice if you have nice grass to lay on. And then they bring in these kind of trailers that have showers, which is wonderful, because you're very filthy at the end of the day. Showers, and then porta potties, and then there's different companies that cater specifically to fires that can create a lot of food, and then they give you bagged lunches so that when you go out on the fire each day, you have your 2 sandwiches and apples and things. But it's quite an organized system as far as people staying at camp, organizing all the logistics. There's also a team of people doing the mapping and many different teams working together. So it's really quite beautiful to see how they all work together. Every year, they also do an annual fire training where you come together, and it's called a kind of an after-action review, where you review what happened the previous year as far as fires, generally if there were casualties, really going into detail of what happened, where were the firefighters, what were the conditions that caused them to lose their lives, so that we try to prevent it again from happening again in the future. And also emphasizing, key is communication again and again. And then they forecast kind of the seasonal forecast of what region is dry. I know this year for this region is the highest off the charts as far as fire danger and risk. So we are, number 1 this year. Some of the perks of firefighting, I mean, as a young 20-year-old, it was the money. So it's really hard work, but it was really good money. And so that's what kind of allowed me to lead a seasonal ski bum life the rest of the year and take off on the shoulder seasons and play a lot. And there's also Veneral Tarpa asked me what I enjoyed about it, and what really came to mind was the camaraderie, that you're working together very, very hard with these people day and night. Oftentimes you are working at night, and your lives depend on each other. Your lives depend on communicating, making sure you're all healthy and safe, and if someone's injured or not doing good, you need to say it, because that compromises the whole team. And you're in these stressful, intense, scary, dangerous situations, which is a young 20-year-old, you're like, oh, this is fun and exciting, but it's the camaraderie and the support is quite beautiful. But I guess on the downside, it's very easy to boost your ego and get very cocky and be like, look at me, I'm a firefighter, ha ha ha. And when you go into small towns, everybody's like, yay, thank you, firefighters. So it's very easy to get a big ego as well. And of course, it's incredibly damaging on the body. So most firefighters only work for 20 years. That's you can retire after 20 years and get a pension, because it's so hard on the lungs and the body. And so, so while I was fighting fire, I was also practicing the Dharma, and I always liked playing with analogies and seeing how much the Dharma fit into fighting fire. And usually at these annual trainings, they would emphasize the importance of situational awareness. They would say, where it's paying attention to where you're at, paying attention to changing conditions and the topography and what's going on. They said, keep your head on a swivel, like always kind of be looking around and just stay aware, stay recognizing that impermanence is a very real thing and can change in a second, and your life can depend on whether you're paying attention or not. And also recognizing, that there's many different causes and conditions. You can be out there, can be feeling calm and quiet, like, okay, we're just having fun digging line or hosing things down, the fire's mellowed down. But then, the temperatures change, the wind shifts, it hits a pocket of fuel, and things can change very fast. So being aware of those causes and conditions, and also that interdependence, that your lives depend on each other, that if you're not hearing people talking on the radio a lot, it might mean because your batteries are dead and you need to change your batteries. And recognizing that you have to keep communicating and saying what's going on. I remember being on one fire and I was up ahead on the slope helping the sawyers remove the brush, so we were kind of at the head of the line. And the fire had shifted around and come from behind us. But because we were with the chainsaws, we couldn't quite hear them shouting at us, "The fire's behind you," until we finally did. And then, so we were depending on our other crew members to let us know, because we couldn't hear from the radios or anything. So really just watching out for each other and recognizing that interdependence. But then at about age 35, I finally realized I was on a fire assignment in Northern California, 100 degrees, very steep slope, very, very hot, and the fire shifted and we had to run out of the very steep hill, and you're carrying these very heavy packs, about a gallon of water at least, tools, emergency shelter, many different things. And so as we were climbing out of there, I was like, I'm too old to be doing this. I'm with 19-year-old guys. Like, okay, I'm done. So that was kind of a turning point of like, all right, there's other ways that I can help fire and not be so physically intense on my body. Also around that time, I had managed to pay off all my college loans and and in my career, I wasn't helping nearly as much as I had wanted to. I was trying to help endangered species in the environment, but it wasn't enough, but it felt like so much effort for such a tiny little benefit. And I could see how much my afflictions were growing. And so after a 1-month winter retreat at the Abbey, I decided to move here. So, and that was the best decision I've made. But now I'm working on my inner fires of, learning to identify what the fuel is that is still out there, especially kind of past stories and projections and things that I've believed since I was a kid that aren't true, but they add that fuel to the afflictions. Especially, I've, become aware of like the inner self-judgment, the shame, comparing myself, thinking I'm not good enough, of how insidious that is. It's like, it's a huge dead forest of dead branches that's not useful, it's not true, and it's time to just kind of clear it out and be like, I'm done with that, that's not true at all. And it's been so helpful in recognizing that and identifying it and purging it. And being able to really recognize my mistakes, that I'm human, that I make flaws, and to recognize that I can grow from them, that I'm not stuck in that. And I think a big part that's really helped is learning how to do that accurate self-assessment of acknowledging my good qualities and not competing and comparing myself to others, and actually really rejoicing in my own good qualities and the qualities of others. And so to continue with these fire analogies of fire prevention, internal fire prevention, removing that old dead wood, and really helps to remove the fuel of the afflictions. And it's not just removing the afflictions and the fuel kind of through the purification practice, but really adding the moisture, the water of appreciation, and really, seeing all that's the positive things that are going on in myself and in others. That is incredibly helpful in combating the fires of the afflictions. If things are moist and green, they're not going to burn. So if I'm feeling appreciative and gratitude and full of joy and positive virtues, then the mind's not going to get afflicted nearly as easily. So even though being a nun is maybe not as exciting or financially lucrative as being a firefighter, it's much, much more rewarding, infinitely so, and it's incredibly satisfying and beneficial on a much, much bigger picture. So may we all work on extinguishing the fires of the afflictions in our own minds and bringing peace and benefit to all sentient beings.